Welcome to The Explainer. We're diving straight into a massive tech mystery today, and it's one that literally hits right at your wallet. Imagine this, August 21st, 2026. No press release, no heads-up email to Prime members, just a sudden, sharp spike in the prices of Amazon's most popular, budget-friendly gadgets. The stuff you've probably got sitting in your living room or kitchen right now. So, we are playing detective today, to figure out exactly why this era of cheap everyday tech is suddenly costing us a premium. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this first clue. We're looking at the humble 5th generation Echo Dot. For the longest time, this thing was basically the checkout lane gum of consumer electronics, right? You toss it in your virtual cart for 49 bucks, and honestly, you barely even think about it. But overnight, that price tag shot up to $79.99. That is an absolutely wild 60% price hike. So almost instantly, what used to be a totally frictionless impulse buy became a pretty serious, considered purchase.
Section 1. The 60% price hike.
Now you might be wondering, was the Echo Dot just a weird glitch? Well, looking at the broader picture, absolutely not. This was a systemic hike across the board. The Fire TV Stick 4K Max went from 60 bucks up to 85. The base 16 gigabyte Kindle, a device with pretty minimal specs just meant for reading, that jumped from 110 bucks to 150. And it even hit the premium networking gear. A 3-pack of the Eero Pro 7 went from $700 to almost $800. So we're talking about sweeping price increases, ranging from 14% to a whopping 60% across smart speakers, streaming sticks, e-readers, the whole shebang.
But here's where it gets super interesting. What actually didn't go up in price? Well, Ring cameras, video doorbells, and the high-end Echo Studio were totally spared. This is a huge clue for us. It tells us these hikes were incredibly targeted. Amazon was intentionally protecting specific hardware categories, aiming these price surges squarely at their entry-level devices, the ones with the absolute slimmest margins.
Which brings us to Section 2. The loss leader era ends.
This highly targeted approach actually brings up a huge realization about Amazon's underlying business model. For years, their foundational strategy was basically to sell gadgets like the Echo and the Fire TV at a loss, or, near break-even. They were cheap front doors. Amazon didn't care about making money on a plastic speaker, they just wanted you in their ecosystem, paying for Prime, subscribing to Audible, and using Alexa. So if that strategy was a slam dunk for so long, why stop now? Why suddenly put a massive toll booth right on the front door?
Well, when pressed by the media, Amazon issued a statement citing, quote, significant increases in memory and storage component costs. Now, I know what you're thinking. At first glance, that sounds like standard generic corporate PR just to justify squeezing us for a few extra bucks, right? But as we really dig into the data, it turns out this isn't an excuse at all. It's actually hard evidence of a massive structural shift happening in the global economy.
And this brilliantly illustrates that Amazon is definitely not acting alone here. Just look at the timeline. Back in June of 2026, Apple raised prices on Macs and iPads, and even bumped the HomePod Mini up by 30 bucks. Then in July, Roku raised their streaming device prices by up to 60%, citing the exact same memory shortage. And then, boom, in August, Amazon followed suit. Dell, Microsoft, HP, even Chinese automakers have been hit by this. The entire industry is literally being forced to abandon cheap hardware because the underlying components have simply become way too expensive.
Section 3. The AI memory squeeze.
So what is actually making these components so crazy expensive? To answer that, we've got to zoom out to the macro level. And the true culprit? It's the global artificial intelligence boom. Throughout 2025, the price of DRAM, the dynamic random access memory that's baked into practically every digital device on Earth, surged by an absolutely staggering 172%. Average retail memory kit prices shot up 344%. You see, memory is that one crucial underlying component that ties a massive AI server and a basic Kindle e-reader together. They both rely on it to function.
So the crucial point is this zero-sum bottleneck known as the wafer trade-off. Semiconductor factories only have a finite amount of silicon wafers they can process at any given time. And the specific memory chips required for those massive AI data centers are called high bandwidth memory, or HBM. Because of their super complex design, fabricating just one bit of HBM requires sacrificing 3 bits of conventional memory, the kind used in your smartphones and smart speakers. It is literally a zero-sum game. These factories physically cannot build AI memory and smart speaker memory at the same time. And honestly, the irony here is just incredible. On one hand, you have this localized shock to consumers, like a $30 price jump on an Echo Dot.
But on the other hand, you have Amazon's own staggering 2026 capital expenditure guidance. $220 billion, largely dedicated to building out massive AI data centers. Think about that for a second. Amazon, the cloud computing giant, is buying up so much memory capacity for its AI servers that it's literally forcing Amazon, the retail giant, to hike the prices of its own consumer gadgets.
And industry experts are absolutely sounding the alarm on this. Apple CEO Tim Cook recently called it a 100-year flood on memory pricing. Meanwhile, Manish Bhatia, an executive VP over at memory maker Micron, described it as the most significant supply and demand disconnect seen in a quarter century. Why? Because big tech giants like Google, Microsoft, Meta, and Amazon are placing these massive, open-ended orders. They are buying up memory to train AI models essentially regardless of the cost.
To really put the sheer scale of this AI demand into perspective, current projections show that a single massive AI megaproject, OpenAI's planned Stargate supercomputer, could theoretically consume up to 40% of the entire global DRAM output. Let that sink in. When a single infrastructure project can eat up nearly half the world's conventional memory supply, everyday consumer tech just doesn't stand a chance.
And right now, the memory manufacturers are holding all the cards. Because of this frantic, unstoppable demand, memory makers have regained absolute pricing power. As proof of that, Samsung is prepping up to an $80 billion shareholder return, right on the heels of a similar move by SK Hynix. They literally have the tech giants, and by extension the consumer gadget makers, completely cornered.
Section 4. The future of budget tech. So, what does this all mean? Where does this leave everyday consumers? Well, the fallout is already hitting global markets hard. Projections for 2026 are showing a global smartphone market contraction of 12.5%, which is the steepest decline we've seen in over a decade. But look at where it's hitting the hardest. The Middle East and Africa are down 20%, and Asia-Pacific is down 13.1%. Why is that? Because the bill of materials costs for low-end phones have jumped 25%. The budget smartphone market is simply and rapidly being priced right out of existence.
Let's move to and see how this builds into even broader casualties across the tech industry. We are seriously looking at the potential extinction of the sub-$200 smartphone category. Plus, we're seeing massive shrinkflation in everyday computers. Where a $600 laptop this year looks exactly like last year's model, but they've secretly downgraded it to 8 gigabytes of RAM instead of 16. All of this is feeding into a rapidly widening digital divide, basically locking out price-sensitive consumers from the modern hardware market.
Ultimately, what we've uncovered in this explainer boils down to this core thesis. The AI boom is cascading through the entire global supply chain. It's inflating costs for everyday people who might never even prompt a chatbot or use an AI tool directly. The very technology that promises to democratize global intelligence is, incredibly ironically, making the basic hardware required just to access the internet way too expensive for millions of people.
Which leaves us with this final, really critical thought to chew on. With analysts projecting that this memory shortage cycle is going to persist straight through 2027 and maybe even 2028, we have to ask, was the era of the $50 smart speaker and the budget smartphone just a temporary anomaly? As the insatiable hunger of AI infrastructure consumes the global supply chain, are we witnessing the permanent end of affordable consumer electronics? It's a massive shift, and it is happening right now, right in our living rooms. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning and keep questioning the true cost of our tech.